Hey everybody, Dylan Bowman here, one of the founders of Free Trail and the host of the Free Trail podcast. Thank you for watching our video podcast. A couple of things before we get started. Number one, please do join Free Trail Pro, our great community for trail runners from around the world. There's a lot of great perks involved in that membership, and we would love to have you on board. Number two, a big thank you to our sponsors here in the video podcast. We don't do real commercial breaks, so I just want to give them a major shout out on the front end here. We have some discount codes in the show notes that you can take advantage of. Number one, Speedland, of course, the makers of the GS Tam, the shoe that bears the Free Trail logo on it, and a product that we worked on to bring to market in the spring of 2023. Our other annual partner is Gnarly Nutrition, makers of fantastic training and racing nutritional supplements that will really help you on your trail journey. We always have a third partner on the show that rotates throughout the year. So depending on who it is now, you can find a link and a discount code in the show notes for that partner as well. But a big thank you to the sponsors who do make our podcast possible. Number three, last but not least, we would really appreciate it while you're here to smash the subscribe button on the Free Trail YouTube channel. You can also click the bell icon to get notifications whenever we post new content. We are working very hard to keep you inspired, informed, and entertained here in the great sport of trail running. Thank you so much. Enjoy the show. Eric Senseman, welcome back to the podcast, buddy. Nice to see you.
Great to be back, Debo. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you making time. We're, of course, going to be talking mostly about your recent retirement announcement. In fact, I think I'll read your whole post in the introduction that I record for this episode. But first, I need to pose my traditional opening question to you here. You have been on the show before, but it was preceding my introduction of this new opening question. And I have a feeling that we'll circle back to it later in the conversation. So to get things started, Mr. Eric Senseman, what makes you you? What are your unique attributes, character traits, strengths, and weaknesses? How do they show up in your life?
Yeah, you hit with that deep dive right off the bat here. I like that. Yeah, I think so. You gave me some advance notice, which was nice. I got to think about this a little bit. And the first thing I thought of is when I was a young man, practically a boy. I was in college, but I took my first philosophy class, and I forget who said it, but someone said there's nothing more dangerous than a false belief. And that had an impact on me. I mean, immediately and through the rest of my life. And I think was very influential in how I developed as a person. So I guess to answer your question, I think what makes me me is I just try to be very authentic, like I don't try to put on airs or pretend to be somebody I'm not. I think the truth, broadly, is super important. And this is like who you are is sort of a instantiation of that. So trying to be who you are, I think, is important. So I'd say that's it.
Yes. All right. Well, this is perfect. Now I'm so glad that we started here because I was sort of debating. Well, he's been on the show before. We're going to mostly talk about his retirement, but that's a beautiful first answer, and I'm sure we'll find ways to weave this throughout the rest of our conversation here today. So I went back and watched the film that Rabbit made about you in the 2023 Black Canyon called Not a Bad Thing on YouTube. And the video starts with you saying something to the effect of, I'm very okay with failure. And it's reflected in sort of the style and strategy that you typically employ on the race course. And it was sort of in reference to your unsuccessful attempt at securing another golden ticket at Black Canyon this year. So, and I feel like just the concept of failure is important for us to explore here as we start to talk about retirement. So maybe just starting there, what's been your relationship with failure over the course of time as a pro athlete? And how does the concept of failure sort of manifest in this retirement decision?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Debo, you really gave him some great clips to pull for that video. I mean, you were being very kind in your analysis. So thanks for that. Yeah. So I think it's a tough sport, right? Like you fail a lot. I mean, even the best. Um, take a Zach Miller who just got second at UTMB. I mean, that guy's wanted to win UTMB for a decade, and how many times does he run it and not won? Keeps going back, keeps going back, keeps training for it. That's just one example. But for me, I was always okay with not achieving what I wanted to, because I just really enjoyed what I was doing. Like I didn't care so much about the result.
Mhm.
Um, I really enjoyed the process to get there. So like the result was what it was. And I suppose I have a bit of a stoicism in the sense that like that never made me who I was, whether or not I won a race or that just wasn't, that didn't define me. So I was okay with not achieving maybe what I wanted to. But on the flip side of that, I think, as I sort of allude to in that video, I think it also allowed me to get more out of myself
Mhm.
because when it did go right, it went right on a scale that I think doesn't happen for most people. I've had this conversation. I'm digressing a little bit here, but I've had this conversation with multiple people, and I'm like, man, I wish that I could go into other people's like bodies and minds when they're running an ultra and see if the experience is the same for them as it is for me. Because
Yeah.
when I race ultras, especially when they go well, especially when they go well, I feel like I'm going to die. It's so, so, so painful. And yeah, just so I don't know if this directly answers your question, but the ability to go into something and not be deterred by the possibility of failure, I think it just allows you to really, when it works, just get way more out of yourself.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we're definitely going to come back to this too. So I don't know if you recall this, but at Black Canyon at the finish line this year, you came up to me, I think,
Yeah,
knowing that I've been struggling with my own running for a while now, and said something to the effect of like,
Dylan, I came up to you because I look up to you and we're friends. But yeah, go ahead.
thank you. Yeah, but also like I think you did identify something in my experience with the sport right now that was
Sure.
akin to something that you were feeling too, and that you said something to the effect of like, when do you know it's time to hang them up? And so clearly this retirement decision has been something that has been germinating in your brain now for at least, since February of this year. So maybe just starting with that, like how long have you been thinking about it, and where were you at that point at Black Canyon, like to sort of make that conscious and intentional decision to come and ask me about where my head was at?
Yeah, I think it started for me after Western States in 2021. So that would have been over 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, when we spoke in February. And I just that race, man, I think it can ruin careers and I think it can make careers. I wish it had been a career maker, not breaker for me, but I was just so devastated. I mean, it was the third time in 2021 I'd gone to that. I'd raced my way in, got the golden ticket. I felt like I had figured things out from the first two attempts. And I just really believed that I was capable of being competitive at that race.
Mhm.
And it was just like, well, objectively the best one, my best time, my best placing, everything else, but it felt the worst. Like I was never in it.
Yeah.
And so coming away from that, I was just like, man, I don't want to do things that I can't be the best at. Like that's maybe a or reductionistic, but like it's not even that. It is that to an extent, but I think more so it's I want to be the best that I can be at the things that I do. And
Mhm.
I felt like that performance at Western States was like a degradation of previous efforts there. Like I had gotten worse almost, or
Mhm.
that's how it felt. And it's a a good thing and a bad thing when you know how good you can be.
Yeah.
And in this case, I think it's a bad thing, because it's like, if I can't be that, I don't know if I want to do this, because I don't get the same joy out of it. That's what I always loved about ultra running,
Yeah.
was my ability to compete. Love competing. I'm super competitive. That's what 100 miles. I'm not really that interested in running 100 miles. 50 miles. Like, honestly, I was never that interested in running 50 miles. What I was interested in was winning races, or trying to.
Yeah. So, okay, so this is going to be really interesting too. And I can totally identify with the feeling of like, I don't want to do stuff that like, I don't feel that, not necessarily that you're the best at, but that like you're not good enough at, right? In other words, like, how do you justify investing so much time and energy and money into performing well at Western States year after year when the result, certainly after the fact, does not make you feel like that investment is justified, right? And at a certain point, that becomes really painful and frustrating. So I want to share
Yes.
with you sort of why I wanted to have this conversation with you so much. And it was last week I was out running, and I've been struggling with my running for a couple of years now, but I've been kind of doing some tempos again. I'm maybe doing 50, 60 miles a week, still a far cry from what I used to do when I was super committed and invested myself. But that morning, the morning you had done your post, I said to Harmony, hey, I think I'm about ready to just hang them up. I just like the pain of sort of identifying as a professional athlete while not behaving or feeling like a professional athlete just causes so much internal friction for me that sometimes I feel like I'd be happier if I just sort of like drew the line in the sand and made the decision and walked away. Anyway, went out on my run that morning, and Harmony and our good friend Kim Gaylord went out for their own run a short time after me. And I bumped into them as I was coming back. And we all stopped and chatted for a second. And Kim said to me, hey, did you see Eric Senseman's post? And I said, no, what are you talking about? And she said, oh, yeah, he just posted this great, like, heartfelt thing about, he DNF'd at his most recent race, and he's making the decision to retire. And on the spot right there, I pulled out my phone without even looking at your post, and I texted you, retirement pod, question mark. And because like I've so been wrestling with this myself. So, now sort of getting into the meat of things, into the decision, the straw that did break the camel's back. I mean, tell us about what happened at Ozark, and what about that experience made you feel like it was the right time to walk away?
Great story, by the way. That's probably the coolest story about how anyone found out that I said I wasn't going to be running anymore. The fact that anyone was talking about it really is, a compliment, but like kind of amazing to me. Like, I didn't even know if I was going to say anything. Right?
Yeah.
It's just like, I just DNF'd another race. I've done that plenty of times. Like, yeah, maybe I just kind of walk away, and that's that. I guess I felt so. I'll get into your question here in a minute, but in terms of the actual, like, I don't know. I think it's kind of lame, like, to be like, oh, I'm retiring. If Mookie Betts tomorrow says I'm retiring, like, yeah, Mookie Betts should be telling people. He's an outfielder for the Dodgers, for those that don't know, and a very good player. But like, ultra running, it's a small sport. It's like, professional is a different sort of label, I think, and like, it doesn't feel like it's that big of a deal. But in any case, I guess I felt I should make my intentions clear. And in all that rambling, I suppose I don't know where to start in terms of answering your question, but I think you really hit the nail on the head with what you said there about the time. Like, the commitment to this sport is any sport at a high level, but ultra running especially. It requires so much of you. It requires everything. Like, let's say you're running 15 hours a week. That's a lot. Well, it's not just those 15 hours of running. It's the mental and physical preparation ahead of time. It's the recovery afterwards. It's being so tired all the time that you can't do anything else. So like, you really are committing your life to this sport. And I think there is beauty in that. Um, but you have to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, then it's a real struggle. And I think that's ultimately where I got. And results are part of that for sure. Like I've said, I never really didn't let that kind of like determine who I was or my worth. And I think that's true. At the same time, I think it's also true that when you don't have those results, it's not as fun. Like all that hard work, and then you really just you aren't able to like go out there and put it to use and like feel good about all the work you did, that sort of thing. So yeah, that had kind of been going on for the last couple of years since States in 21. Yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything, and then I can go into Ozarks in particular.
Yeah, well, I just, kind of reiterating that not only does it compromise the fun when the results don't reflect the investment and the commitment and the desire to perform, but it's also like beyond not being fun, it fucking hurts emotionally, right? Because it's sort of like, well, why am I wasting my time on this? Like, that was 6 months of my life, like flushed down the drain. Like, what do my sponsors think about this? Now I got to think, hey, my contract's coming up. What if they walk away? What if they reduce the amount they pay me? All those things are always in our heads. And I want to come back and really just talk more about the reality of being a professional athlete. But before we get there, I think it's important to just talk about this Ozark race and why that was the point at which you decided to draw this line in the sand.
Yeah, so I had decided after Black Canyon, not long after that, I was like, I'm doing one more 100 and I'm done. And I had signed up for Vermont, which was in July, because it's another classic, not point to point like Western States, but basically every mile is unique, which I really like that style of race. And yeah, just the history and some really strong runners have run that course, and it fit well. But then it was canceled a few days before due to unprecedented rain, and the state was in a state of national emergency. I forget the exact term that designates that level of like problem, but it was like very serious in terms of the flooding, and they're worried about dams breaking and roads were getting washed out. Part of the course was underwater a few days before the race. So, it was serious. I think they made the right call in not having to race. And it may have been fortunate because I actually got COVID 9 days before Vermont. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't test negative till like 2 days before, but I was just going to run it. But it got canceled. So I said, okay, man, I really wanted to be done with this. What am I going to do now? So I started looking into other races, and there aren't that many hundreds, like at least that I was interested in. Like I want a point to point, ideally. That's kind of it. Like that was my criteria, and like there aren't that many. So I came across the Ozark Trail 100, and I was like, oh, it's actually pretty old. It's been around for 15, 16 years. It's back in Missouri where I'm from.
Yep.
Point to point. We'll do that. But it wasn't until the end of October. So I was like, man, I gotta like force myself to be a professional athlete for a few more months. I think I put my best foot forward, and like things actually went pretty well. Getting ready for it, I had my buddy Stephen Kirsch coaching me. That's like one of the only times I've had someone write training for me.
Wow.
Yeah, in 12 years of ultra running, but I just couldn't make myself run. It was crazy.
Really?
Like, it was so bad, man.
So like, you were already checked out. I mean, at least that's my interpretation.
I was checked out. Now under Coach Steve, we got up to 93 miles a week. So like I was back to training pretty solid.
Look at Coach Steve drawing up the big volume. Come on.
Shout out to Coach Steve. But yeah, Dylan, it was crazy. Like after Vermont, I'd be like, all right, I got to start training again. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to do a 3-hour run on Saturday. And Saturday would come and I'd wake up and I'd be like, nah, man, I don't want to run for 3 hours. Like that sounds horrible. And then I'd be like, all right, I'll just go run for an hour. Like just get something in. And then I'd be like, nah, you know, what's an hour run gonna do? I'm just, I'm not even, I just wouldn't run.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, I need somebody. If somebody just draws up training for me, I'll do it. But I just can't make myself do it. So anyhow, things went well, and I feel like this is becoming way too long of a story. So I'm going to condense the rest. I strained my calf 30 days exactly before Ozark. I was
Yeah.
doing a workout and pulled up, like it hurt, but didn't seem too bad. It never healed before Ozark. I was running very little for that next 4 weeks. Um, the pain was just always there, every step. And yeah, on race day, eventually that was a problem. Not so much the pain itself in the calf, but I think unconsciously my biomechanics were like adjusting a bit,
Yeah.
in response to that pain. And so after like 20 miles, it was just like everything, it felt like I'd run 100,
Yeah.
and everything just started on the right side where that calf was strained, like just getting really like locked up, and like just everything was so messed up. By mile 40, I was still running. Like I was still running everything, but like I was running 14-minute pace. It was crazy. Like I've never run 14-minute pace in my life. So I just wasn't healthy, I think is the short story. Um, and then the next day after the race, it was like, I don't know, a weight was lifted.
Okay. So
uh,
let's come back to that. But I mean, I now super identify with what you just said too, because a lot of what I've been experiencing is kind of the change in motivation too. And in my best years, I was so disciplined. I never missed a workout. I never cut a run short. And now it happens all the time where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to try and do this today. And then I call Harmony. I'm like, hey, will you pick me up here? I just don't want to do it. Right. And I think those are the early indications that, you're not as invested anymore. So you said that you made the decision kind of at Black Canyon. I'm going to run one more 100, then we're walking away. Had things gone perfectly at Ozark, do you think you would have adhered to that commitment?
yeah,
You were,
I do. I mean,
mm,
it's hard to say, right? Because it didn't. But I think it's harder to walk away when it doesn't go well in that scenario, personally. Um,
yeah, because you're like, give me one more shot,
yeah,
go
exactly.
out on a
And
high note.
yeah, right. But then like I woke up the next day and I was like, thank God I don't have to do that again. I
Wow.
mean, and maybe I will. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
it could be next year, it could be in 10 years. What maybe there will come a day when I say, oh, I really want to go do 100 miles again. And if that day comes, great. I'm not going to be doing it competitively, I can
Yeah.
tell you that. But yes, right now, no interest at all. So
Mm,
it was an easy decision, but hard to say if it had gone well.
okay. So coming back to the hard realities of being a pro athlete in a niche sport, I imagine part of this was kind of frustration, like we've talked about, change in motivation, which we talked about. I wondered how much could be attributed to economics, or like how much of it was lifestyle related, like those more practical things.
Yeah. Uh, so I should start by saying, um, the sponsors I had were always, I mean, just really great.
Mm,
Like, uh, I could run the races I wanted. I didn't feel beholden to anyone. Now Rabbit was the only one really paying me. My other sponsors would be gear, or maybe a bonus structure, maybe some travel money. But like Rabbit was the only one actually, paying me come what may. So maybe that was part of it too. Like I just didn't feel like anyone had anything over me. Like I didn't. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but like
totally. Yeah.
yeah, and I always had other income. I always worked. Like
Yeah.
I never was just a runner. I always had jobs to make money. So yeah, that none of that was ever an issue, which is I think really lucky. I think it's a lot more difficult in this sport because it's such a niche sport, and fewer eyeballs and less money and all of that to really be a pro athlete. Like I don't know, but if we were to really look at the sport and say, okay, what's like a living wage? Let's say it's, I don't know, let's call it 40 grand a year, is a living wage. Like how many US runners are making 40 grand a year in the ultra running scene? I don't think it's very many. I don't know, but I don't think there's that many true professionals. So yeah, I don't, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. I definitely think it's harder though if it is your only job and
Yeah.
your only source of income.
So coming back to what we talked about how being a pro athlete is just fucking brutal. That's why my show focuses on stories of people like you, because I think pro athletes are heroes who succeed and fail so publicly and whose lifestyle epitomizes total dedication, but it's so hard. And I think there's a lot of people who see what the pros do in our sport on Instagram, and it's not clear to them that it's a very hard way to make a living. What do you think are the things that are like most misunderstood about, being a professional athlete? And what, if anything, from the lifestyle are you most eager to leave behind?
I'm currently, I have a draft of a article for Rabbit.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, which I don't know. I've been going back, like I gotta like go away from it for a day and then come back and try to make sense of what I've written, and it's not done, but like I'm really trying to describe without being wordy. Um, yeah, I'm trying to be succinct about it, but to describe what, in part, what you were just asking about, which is like, or pointing out, it's really fucking hard to be at a high level in this sport. And it sounds great and glamorous. So like, oh yeah, I'd love to win Western States. Like, I'm sure there's thousands of ultra runners, who want that or think that or whatever. But like the reality of what it takes to get there, most people would be unwilling or unable to accomplish. Because I've seen what it takes to, for example, win Western States. Not because I did it, to be clear, but because I know someone who has. You, everything in your life that you like that isn't running, it has to take the back seat.
Yeah.
Everything. Um, I don't know which examples to go into or how many times, but like, I don't know. Do you like to drink? Okay, well, you really, if you want to win Western States, you should not be drinking, or you should be drinking very little.
Yeah.
Do you like to spend time with your significant other? Okay, you have to do a lot less of that if you want to win Western State. I'm dead serious. Like
Yeah.
I
Like, hey babe, you want to lay on the couch again tonight?
yeah, like you want to, oh, it's Saturday. You should go down to Oak Creek and like, sit in the creek and have a beer and whatever. No, you can't do that. You have to go run for 4 hours, and then you're going to be so tired that you're not going to want to do anything else. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know how to succinctly like explain all that except to just say what you said, which is this sport it looks glamorous when you're at the top, but people don't see what's underneath, like the 90% of the iceberg, right?
Yeah. And it is just like, it's physically painful. And then I think we can't overemphasize the amount, or at least from speaking for myself, the amount the amount of time we do spend in our own heads contemplating the security of our jobs. And when that's the case, when you're on these sort of short-term contracts that very much depend on your performance, and you only have 4 or 5 opportunities to perform a year, and 3 or 4 of those don't go perfectly.
Yeah, 4 or 5. That's even a lot.
Right.
I mean, in my experience, it was hard for me to try to raise 4 or 5 times hard every year. But yeah, go on.
And even if you do have great sponsors like Rabbit who understand your worth outside of standing on podiums, it also feels shitty to be paid as a professional athlete when you're not standing on podiums. Like you feel like a fraud. And anyway, we're making it sound like it's the worst job in the world. It probably is one of the best jobs in the world. It's an amazing thing, but I just think it's important to communicate that it's not glamorous. Nobody's getting rich. Everybody is suffering. And so I very much identify with the feeling of like, all right, man, I can't do this anymore, right? I can't do this anymore. And so anyway, that kind of leads me into something else I wanted to talk to you about, which was, my brother hosted a podcast with me as a guest after Hard Rock this year. And one of the things we talked about was how in most professional sports, there is a moment where athletes have to confront the decision of retirement. And to this point, there haven't been a lot of high profile retirements in professional trail running. And especially in this age of social media and influencers, you can kind of craft a career and be useful to brands and partners beyond just performing well and finishing on podiums like we were just talking about. So why draw the line in the sand now? Like, why make this so explicit? And maybe this is a good time for you to expand on the feeling of freedom that came the morning after you woke up from the Ozark 100.
Yeah. So again, to credit my sponsors, they would have re-signed me. Like I could have kept doing it. I think I'm very lucky. Like I haven't raced very well the last few years. But I think I have these brands that really believe in me, and that's awesome. But what you just started describing is my worst nightmare. To be in this sport and to be anything, to be known, recognized, admired, anything for anything beyond your ability as an athlete, man, I don't want that. Like that's the opposite of what I want. Like love me because I won JFK one time. Don't love me because I have a mustache and you think it's cool. You know what I mean? Or like you like my posts. I mean, that's fine. I get it. I don't want that. Like, that's not what I want to be known for. So as soon as my performance is not at a level that I think is high enough that I should even be in a conversation anymore, I'm done. Like to be an influencer, that's like, I've had someone call me an influencer before and like, I almost just disintegrated. Like I felt so small and like, oh no. And that's fine. Some people, that's what they want, whatever. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing for anyone else. For me personally, to be an athlete, I just wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be good at the sport that I chose to do. And beyond that, I'm not really that interested in like being around, I guess, or like in the conversation or in the scene. Like I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but just a lot of things all at once.
This is good though, because this is somewhere where again our overlap is significant, because I've gotten to the point now where most people associate me with my podcast and with Free Trail than they do with what I accomplished as a pro athlete myself. And it makes me cringe a lot of the time. Right. And that's the reason why, without going into too much detail, I try and set things up to where partnerships go through Free Trail and what we do rather than, go through me as an athlete anymore, because like, I don't want to feel like I'm a fraud.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And for any listeners out there who don't know the great history of Dylan Bowman's career, this man has been 7th, 5th, and 3rd at Western States.
How did you remember that, bro?
In that order. And I think that 4th year, I was telling people you were going to win. Not that anyone was listening. Yeah, so Dylan Bowman is no fraud, but I understand. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, that's not for me, man. Like, I don't even want, it's really nice and it's really cool. Like, man, it was like 4 years ago. My sister got married in Jackson, Wyoming, and we're just like in a diner. And this guy comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, are you Eric Senseman?" And I was like, yeah, I mean, I am. And he's like, "Oh man, that's great. I'm an ultra runner. I know who you are basically." And like, that's really cool. like that.
It's a good
I'm
feeling.
not telling. It's a good feeling, but I'm telling that just by way of like an example. I never wanted any of that. Like
Yeah.
I didn't get into ultra running to like try to be famous or something. You can't even be famous in ultra running. Like anyone that's famous in ultra running sort of transcends the sport. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a Killian or a Courtney. But I never wanted any of that. And not that I have it on that, high of a level, but insofar as I do, I don't want it to be because it's anything other than he was in the mix for
Yeah.
at least a little bit,
Yeah.
There was a couple of years there where like if he showed up, he had a chance to like compete with some really good runners. That's what I would like to hold on to. Not the social media or anything else.
So say more about the feeling of freedom, because I think
Mm,
oftentimes what we're talking around here is that being a professional athlete and wrestling with a lot of those emotional considerations that we've talked about compromises our ability to enjoy the practice.
yeah.
Now there you have the ability without those expectations to
Yeah.
potentially reconnect with the joy a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Dylan, I feel like you've asked some pretty straightforward questions that I've managed to just like talk past, so I
No, this is
apologize.
fantastic.
But you did ask me, like, what are you looking forward to? Why now that you're not committing everything to ultra running? Yeah, so I felt a weight lifted initially just because of what I was describing earlier. Like the past at least 6 months, just really hard to get myself to train. And so and then it's just this conflict. Either you don't go out and do the training that you need to, and then you have this like anxiety the rest of the day. Like the feeling. It's like I didn't get that run in that I know I really needed to do. Horrible feeling. Or you're continuing to sacrifice a lot of things in your life in order to continue to make it happen, even though you don't really want to be doing it.
Yeah.
And neither one of those is a very fun place to be. I don't think. So I feel like a weight was lifted initially. Like the day after, I was like, I don't have to do this anymore. Like I don't have to force myself to go train. So yeah, what does that mean exactly? Well, the way I would the way I look at it or would explain it is there's a lot of things to do in life. Um, I I think to do anything and make it worthwhile, you should do it to your fullest ability. And for me, that was ultra running for basically 12 years. But there's other stuff I'd like to do,
Yeah.
and you can't do those things to the fullest extent. I believe you can't get like the full experience of something else when so much of yourself is committed to ultra running.
Yeah.
So I don't know exactly what those other things are, like necessarily, but I just know that I want to be able to pursue other interests and other things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, going to a thrift store and walking around for an hour. Like my wife loves that sort of stuff. I would never do that because I was so tired. Like I didn't want to walk around. So that's like a really trite example, but like, yeah.
But it's a blank slate. And
Yeah.
there's the feeling of freedom and excitement inherent in a blank slate.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's right.
I'd love to hear you talk about the sponsor thing, and especially Rabbit. Monica DeVries is somebody I look up to, and I know you have a personal relationship with her. She's been a guest on the podcast. It's been a few years now, the founder of Rabbit. Anything from any conversations with Monica in particular from, like how you've sort of, I'm sure you initiated conversations with them about this decision. So I'm sure the listeners would love to hear how those conversations go too.
Sure. Yeah. And I can only speak to my experience with this particular brand. Yeah. And Monica is a co-founder with Jill. I don't know if you know Jill Deering.
Don't know.
Okay. Jill is also great. So, both founders have been nothing but supportive. And I don't know. It just my whole history and relationship with Rabbit, it's almost like it was created in a lab or something. Like it was just too good, I think. Like it just worked perfectly. There was never any friction. There was no like seemed like we were always kind of on the same page about everything the whole time I was there. Started when they were pretty darn small. And frankly, I wasn't I would say at the height of my powers in terms of my abilities as an ultra runner. And we both sort of like grew together and like got bigger together and had success together. And obviously they're very separate as well. But yeah, I couldn't say more good things about Rabbit. And in turn, so I'm telling you all that backstory just to like set the stage for like, I told them I was going to quit at the end of 2020. And they were like, well, we'd love to have you. Or I guess it was 2021, forgive me, 2021. And they're like, well, we'd love to have you for a couple more years, or, we'd love to re-sign you for another contract. But if that's what you want to do, fine. And then it got to like the end of the year in November, and I put in for the states lottery, and I was like, yeah,
One more ride.
yeah, let's do it again. And they were totally, totally cool. And so same sort of deal this year. Monica texted me just the other day. She wanted to catch up. So I gotta give her a call. But just text me, was like, I'm bummed that this is it. Which is, yeah, I mean, what more could you ask for in terms of like, hey, I'm walking away and they're still calling my name,
Yeah, right.
But yeah, you're
like,
still
they'd still be there for you if you wanted to come back. Yeah,
totally.
A lot of athletes don't have that luxury,
Exactly. And so, yeah, that's exactly right. And I think to your point though, Debo, like you don't see people retiring from the sport per se because they find other ways to be valuable for a brand. And like you really don't have to necessarily, because even then, like, yeah, it's just different people, different motivations. The sport has a lot for everybody. And like if you want to keep doing it, you can go run less competitive races and still, be winning races and your sponsor's happy, right? Like as one example. Or you can be more of an ambassador and, go to events and like you can stay in the sport. But yeah.
Any other convos with like your friends, training partners in flag, or with your wife around this that you think the listeners would be interested to hear?
Yeah, I think my friends are a bit puzzled, I feel. I mean,
because they're still in it.
They're still in it. That's right. I mean, my wife Jackie's been amazing. Like if I told her I'm going to do this another 15 years, so get ready to cruise 60 more times, she'd be like, all right. But, I think she's pretty excited that like my life will have more flexibility.
Guys can go on a vacation that's not around a race, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. That's Dylan. That's one of the first things she mentioned. She's like, cool, let's go on an actual vacation, not to go to one of your races, which I totally get. But yeah, in terms of my friends, because everybody, I'm friends with guys that are really good runners, and it hasn't been all like rainbows and butterflies. I don't think it is for anyone, but like, my friends in particular, like gone through rough patches, low patches. And so, yeah, I think like trying to understand how I know that I don't want to do this anymore has been like a topic of conversation. I don't know that I've satisfied the interest or, their curiosity, but I think it comes from a place of like, oh, when's it going to be time for me? How am I going to know? But I think it's too idiosyncratic. Like I don't think you can brush in broad strokes when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
well, now they've got a better, more reliable drinking buddy. When everybody else is in hard training mode, like, hey, Senseman will go to the brewery with me.
I was kind of joking with him, like, I might need new friends because, my friends don't drink very much, and
Yeah.
like I would drink less for sure, but like I like to drink, and if I'm not training, there might be some more of that.
Yeah, I gotta say my alcohol intake has increased substantially since my running has deteriorated. Maybe those two things are not unrelated.
Yeah,
Let's
there's
talk
an
about
inverse
this.
correlation.
Yeah, let's talk about the state of the sport a little bit right now. And I ask
Yeah.
because I'm like all in on trail running still, first as a pro athlete, now with our business. And recently, and oh man, I've been like the target of some, criticism. And then recently there's been these like super inflammatory, divisive moments of controversy. And both those things just like frustrate me really deeply and make me wonder, like, is trail running actually going to save the world like we say it is? Or are we just like everybody else, divided and tribal and prone to cancellation and all that shit that happens in everything else online?
Yep.
And so, like, even though I'm a trail running evangelist, there have been a few moments recently that make me just like frustrated. Like, man, I just want to walk away too. Does any of that resonate with you? Is there anything about like this moment in trail running that makes you want to leave, or is it purely a performance and a change in motivation decision for you, and you're still in love with the people, the culture, the community, etc.?
Purely, yeah, purely a results thing for me. No, no hard or no ill will towards ultra running at large, or anyone in it, man. Like anyone that I've met in the sport. I mean, I have so many friends, right? Just from like being an ultra runner, and like people are my dog. uh, People are really great in the sport as a whole,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, nothing there at all. I think a lot of what's going on now will is viewed, I think, is a bad thing because fair enough, there are there are some bad things, but on the other hand, this is what happens, I think, in any community or in any activity, any organized group thing when it gets bigger. So, again, some people might think that's good or bad that the sport's getting bigger, and it doesn't make it okay. It doesn't justify it. But I think you can at least explain what's going on is like, oh, this sport's starting to be something that it wasn't.
Yeah.
So that I don't know that that's really helpful in terms of like cultural commentary, but I guess my assessment would just be the sport's growing and like money gets involved, power gets involved, that problems happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that that's not a factor or variable contributing to the decision to walk away. And I hope you will stay involved in the community. And I guess on that note, being more explicit about it, your retirement post did say you're retiring from professional ultra running, and you, in our conversation, have left the door open to maybe coming back and doing something more casually, more recreationally. How do you anticipate interfacing with the sport in the coming years?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've thought too much about what that'll look like. This one of the things I like the most about about or opportunities that I've got has been the announcing. Like I've really enjoyed that. It's been 3 times, I guess. But I thought that's a lot of fun. And yeah, if I had opportunities like that, I'd be really excited. I'm still, I'll still be out at races. I'm going to be at Black Canyon. Like all three, my buddies are all running it. Tim, Jared, Steven, all three of them are running it. So like, I'm not going anywhere. But it's really the online stuff, man. It's like I just don't like social media, and that is a component, like it or not, for basically everyone in the sport. Again, unless you're really, 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 really good, you might get a pass. But yeah, it's kind of that stuff that I'm excited to step away from.
Yeah. All right. Well, so what is next then? Like we all need to have careers, and athletes understand the value of like pouring our heart and soul into something. And I think it would
Yeah.
be hard to walk away from the sport and not have something to kind of pour your heart into. What are you going to do professionally? And maybe if there's anything else like on the hobby or lifestyle front where you could devote some of that energy and commitment that you developed as an ultra runner?
Yeah, so I started a new job. So I've been working at Squirrel's Nut Butter for the last over 5 years.
Oh,
And it was great. A lot of fun working there. Chris Thornley, one of the best dudes in the world. But pretty small company. Like I felt like I'd kind of got to the end of the road in terms of like it being fulfilling and challenging. So yeah, ended my job there at the end of May, and then I have a friend who started a private equity company like 4 years ago, and I said, hey, I need a job and I have no career experience. I think my brain works pretty well though, and I know how to work hard, as evidenced by my career as an ultra runner. You want to give me a job? And he graciously said, "Yeah, I'll start you like everybody else." And I said, "Cool, but remember, we're really good friends. So like, eventually, if there's some nepotism, we should be okay with that, right?" And he just kind of laughed. But yeah, so I'm like a month into or 5, 6 weeks into this job, and it's been awesome, man. I really enjoy it. Like,
what kind
I
of
feel like I'm
private equity? This is a huge left turn here, going from a professional ultra runner to a private
yeah.
equity guy, Eric Senseman, now an
Yeah,
investment banker of sorts.
he's it's primarily real estate.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but it's like, yeah, it's crazy interesting and just like
Oh,
learning a ton. And so it's like really challenging and engaging. Like the day just flies by. Like I start
yeah.
working and then all of a sudden it's 2, 3 p.m. and I'm like, whoa, what happened? I was
That's,
like describing this to my wife who has worked hard her whole life at a regular job, not, running around in the woods. And I like kind of was describing to her my first couple of days, and she's like, yeah, you're just describing work. Like that's what it means to have a job. I was like, yeah, it's new to me. Yeah. So it's been good.
well, you look good as a working stiff, bro.
Thank you.
I
Thank
do
you,
think
Devo.
that, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of excitement and learning a new business, a new career path, something that's completely foreign, gives you a lot of opportunity to grow and improve in the same way that you probably felt that when you were coming into trail running in your early mid 20s and feeling like, man, really like to learn this, really like to see
Yeah.
how good I can get. And, that improvement process and that learning something new is something that can't be underestimated in terms of just like, helping us grow and adding satisfaction to our lives. And just to add sort of a finer point on it and bringing things full circle here, you started by saying, just sort of like you wanting to always be authentic and tied to reality and truth. And it feels to me like this is an example of that, right? Of like, you know, you weren't a committed professional athlete anymore. And that does cause an internal tension. And this is an
Yeah.
a realignment with authenticity and truth and acknowledging the authenticity of that change in motivation. So it's good that you can be honest with yourself about it, because I think a lot of people, it would take a lot longer to, sort of embrace that reality. So
Yeah, well said. And maybe on a final note to your point, I suppose maybe I'm making this sound easy, but like I said, it's been over 2 years that I've been thinking about this, and I've definitely gone back and forth on it over the years. But like, it took a while, is my point. Like, I don't think you just wake up one day and say like, "All right, I'm done." Um, it wasn't always easy, but like you said, kind of over time was able to kind of like be realistic and objective, and like you really don't want this anymore.
yeah,
And I know it's tough to give up because you hold on to those really fleeting and limited, as I call them, moments that have happened like 4 or 5 times, and
yeah.
you want that again. But like, remember, you don't want to do all the stuff you have to do to get that. So like, yeah, it takes time to like process for sure.
Yeah. So final question there, and for you, Senseman, a question that I also ask everybody here on the show to close things out on a positive note. Who is one person that you admire inside or outside of sport? It can be living or dead. And why do you admire that person?
Another one I was happy to have advance notice on. I couldn't pick one without feeling like I was leaving out the rest. So I'm just going to say my grandparents at large, three of whom are still alive today, which is pretty crazy. One of whom is 102 years old. But yeah, all of them are some of the most giving, kind people that I've ever known. And I think those are traits that, help you live a fulfilling life and a life that adds value to other people, which I think is part of a fulfilling life. That kindness and that generosity. So those are the things I really admire about all my grandparents. And try to retain those for myself as well.
Dude, see, we have so much in common, buddy. I was in Chicago this past weekend to celebrate two of my grandparents who
That's why you were there.
They've just turned 90. My grandfather, who is still completely lucid, crisp, clear, amazing thinker, brilliant person. But my grandmother, who is approaching the end, and we've all acknowledged that reality. And it was such a special thing to be back, now that I'm a father myself. We took a photograph of me, my mom, my son, and my grandfather. So 4 generations, great grandfather. Cool. And one of the things that I remarked upon to Harmony, because my family, as you can imagine, a lot of people giving speeches, a lot of public speeches. And there was such an outpouring of love and respect for my grandparents, who had 7 children, so big family. And, that's one of the things that I said to Harmony is like, man, I hope when I'm 90, we can also have a table full of people who are willing to stand up and like say good things about us. There's nothing, there's really nothing else worth striving for in life except for that. So anyway.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you don't get to that place by taking. I think you get there by giving. People who are surrounded with people that love them tend to be very generous people. So that's great.
Yeah. All right, Senseman, well, it's good to catch up with you, buddy, and congratulations on making this decision. I hope the transition is inspiring, fruitful, and leads to an amazing new chapter of your life. And I'm sure the audience will appreciate you coming on and talking about it candidly. Yeah, thanks, Debo. I appreciate you having me. Probably the only person I'd want to pod with about this. So thanks for the invite. Hell yeah, buddy.